Hi, welcome back. This is the next video in the series that I have on working this colorwork tutorial scarf. And this video is about mosaic knitting. The last video was about slip stitch knitting, and so we're moving forward in our sequence with the mosaic knitting. I want to tell you a little bit about mosaic knitting first, and then we're going to talk about the fabric and the chart and how to read a chart, and then I'll show you how to create the sample. Mosaic knitting is a slip stitch pattern. It is a subset of the large group of stitches called slipped knitting. What makes mosaic knitting different and its own little subset in the slip stitch knitting group is that it's always worked with more than one color, whereas slip stitch knitting can be worked with just one color. And in mosaic knitting, the stitches are always slipped purlwise, and they're always slipped with the yarn on the wrong side of the fabric. So the slipping happens over here. The yarn's held to the back when you're slipping a stitch. This is a mosaic knitting worked in garter stitch. It can also be worked in stockinette stitch or in a combination of garter stitch and stockinette, which is absolutely lovely. I really love that technique. It creates a very dense fabric. It's actually denser than garter stitch. So let's actually see how dense this is. We're going to do a little bit of a measuring of the rows. And here we've got our ruler. 1 inch is right here, right above the U. So we're just going to see how many rows we have in 1 inch. I'll use a marker here. Okay, so the 1 inch starts right here and ends right here. So we have 1 garter ridge, 2, 3, 4, this one here, 5, 6, 6.5, here's the one, 6.5 garter ridges. Now let's look down here where we were doing garter stitch, just plain, and let's measure this gauge. So we had 6.5 garter ridges to the inch. Here's the 0 line, here's the 1 line. Here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 garter ridges. So the mosaic knitting is more dense per inch by 1.5 ridges. So that creates an issue when you're doing a garter stitch edge, a border in garter stitch. You can't really maintain that up here because this is more dense. So I created some short rows in here, and you can see one here and one here, and there's one here, although it's not very visible, so that the edge maintains the same distance as here. If I didn't put those short rows in, this fabric would be pulling down like this, and it would not be very attractive. So in the directions for this tutorial, I tell how to do that, and I'm going to show you how to do that in just a second. So that's the fabric. Now let's look at a chart. This is the chart for this particular pattern. The red indicates where I put the short rows. Green over here, and I'll give you directions for how to do those in the written tutorial. There's 2 colors on this chart, dark and light. Notice that there are row numbers on this side and on this side. This first row has a 1 here and a 2 over here on the same row. And that's because mosaic knitting is charted 2 rows at a time. So row 1 you would work over like this, and then row 2 you work back like this. Row 3 you work over like this. Row 4, same line, coming back. So this makes it great because when you're doing the even number rows, you just copy what you did on the right side row. It's already on your needle, and I'll show you that in just a couple of minutes. Notice that every other row is dark and the rows in between are light. Whichever the color is at the beginning of the row, that's the color that is going to be worked on that row. This row is solid, so all the stitches are going to be dark. This row says we start with the light yarn, so this is going to be knit, 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 knit. This color is not going to be knit with the light yarn, it's going to be slipped with the yarn in the back. Knit, 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 slip, knit, slip, knit. Turn the work, knit, slip with the yarn in the front, knit, slip with the yarn in the front, and this is going to be in the little legend for the chart. It'll explain all of this. It'll all be in writing in the tutorial. This row you're going to work with the dark yarn. So you'll knit, 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 slip with the yarn in back, knit, slip with the yarn in the back, knit, slip, etc. And when you come back, knit, slip with the yarn in front, knit, slip with the yarn in front, knit, etc. Then this row's white. Okay, so that's how you read a mosaic chart, and this will be written out as well. So I'm going to just knit a little sample of this, and I'm going to cut it off right here, just so we're just doing a little piece of it. I'm going to just draw a line here. I'm going to knit from here to here because I want to show you how to do these parts here. So we're going to white this one out and white this one out. Okay? So both those edges look exactly the same. Can you see that? So I have my project started here. So first we're going to knit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 dark stitches. I have 11 stitches on here because even though you will read that you work to the salvage stitches, we're going to create that blue border or the dark border right up the edge. So this is an extra salvage stitch. Selvage. This is an extra selvage stitch over here. It just borders it, and then we're going to have 2 stitches on the border all the way up. Okay? This is the second stitch, this column here. This column is the second selvage stitch. So we're having 2 selvage stitches at each side. Okay, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, plus a selvage stitch here and a selvage stitch here. So I need 11 stitches on my needle. The selvage stitches are not shown on the chart. You'll just know that they're there. So we're going to start up with our dark color and do these stitches first, and then I'm going to maintain the dark up the edge. So we'll move this up so it's not quite so prominent here, and I'm just going to knit from here to here and back, plus the selvage stitch on each side. And you can throw continental, doesn't really matter. What we're learning here is how to read the chart and how to work mosaic knitting. Now over on this first left side there's a short row. Remember there's that green right there? So I'm going to show you how to do the short row. It's going to be over the 2 selvage stitches. This is a 2 selvage edge. So you knit 2, then slip the next stitch, bring the yarn forward, slip that stitch, turn your work, knit the 2 again. Now that stitch is wrapped. Can you see how there's a wrap around it? And we're not going to pick it up to conceal it like you would normally do, because wraps in garter stitch look just like garter stitch. They're invisible. Now we're going to knit back. So that's our first little short row there. We're going to knit back to the other side and create our second short row. And this we're doing the base line of the dark, that first row, row 1 and row 2, plus our little short rows. Now, when we do the short row over here, we have to remember though, remember in color work, we're going to have this one yarn that's being carried up the side. So what do we do when we trap? Because now we need to trap. We bring the dark down over the light and back up. That traps the light. So it's going to be carried up the side. We're going to knit our 2 stitches for the short row. It's just a 2-stitch short row. Very short, we just need it on the edge. Slip this stitch over, bring the yarn forward, slip the stitch back point to point. You're not changing the stitch orientation, and knit back. So now we've done our base line, row 1 and 2, plus a short row on each side. Now, this is the tricky part, and it will be described in the written tutorial. See our little short rows there? Makes this come down right now, but as these shrink up, when we go up, it'll pull up and it'll be just perfect. So our selvage stitch is always going to be knit in the dark. The first selvage stitch on each side is always going to be knitted. You can't slip them. I've tried it. Doesn't work. You can try it, and I'm open to suggestions. If you have a better way, I'm open to see it. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to knit 4 white, slip a dark, knit 4 white, and then a selvage stitch, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4 whites. Now we slip this stitch, and it's just like in slip stitch knitting, you want to leave enough yarn behind it for that stitch to live. Don't pull it up too tight. Then we're going to knit 4. And here's our selvage stitch. It's not going to be worked because we don't have any green yarn right now. We don't have the dark. It's not over here. So we just turn our work. No short row wraps, nothing. Just turn the work. You're going to be amazed at what this does. And then we're going to just follow that same. Now we just follow our stitches. So we've got 4 knits. And now we have a dark coming up. We can see it. Bring the yarn forward. Slip the dark. Don't pull the yarn too tight. It needs to have living space. Knit 4. Bring the yarn to this side. Turn the work. Now we already knitted that first green stitch. Remember, we knitted over there to start the white, so it's already been knitted. Now we've got the white yarn on the back and the green yarn on the back. Take the green yarn over the top of the white. And this row, there's going to be 1, 2, 3, slip a white, knit a black, slip a white, knit 3 black. But remember, we have a selvage stitch on each side. We already did this selvage stitch, so we've got 3 blacks to knit. 1, 2, 3, then slip a white, knit a black, slip a white, knit our 3, and knit the selvage stitch. So it didn't get knitted on the white rows. That's why we needed to do the short row down here, because this is short 1 stitch there. Now we're going to knit back, no slipping the edge stitches, and we follow what's on our needle. On the wrong side rows, we just follow what's on the needle. It makes it very easy. When we come to the slip stitch, bring the yarn forward to the front, slip the stitch, knit, slip, knit, 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 and knit the selvage stitch. That's what's going on there. I got a split stitch. Okay, knit the selvage stitch. Now we turn our work and we're ready to do row 7. We've done 1, 3, 5. Now we're ready to do 7. It's white, but we're going to knit our selvage stitch first in the green. So we're going to knit a stitch, Then we're going to drop the green over the white. We've got our green and our white. Drop the green over the white, bring the white up under the green, and we're going to knit 2 white stitches. Don't pull that yarn up tight or you'll have a problem with the edge stretchability. And then we're going to knit this one, this one, this one, and we're slipping the greens, then 2 whites, and we keep the edge stitched there. We don't work it. Turn the work, knit back, following the pattern on the needle. Slip, knit, slip, knit, slip, knit, knit. Bring the yarn to the front or the wrong side. Now we've already knit that green stitch, right? The dark yarn. So that's how we started out the row. Here we have our yarn on the back. We bring it over the white, white under, and we're going to do we're on row 9. So this is the selvage stitch. Now we're going to knit 9 and then we slip these. So we're slipping every other stitch. So we knit this, slip, knit, slip, knit, slip, knit, slip, knit, and knit the selvage stitch. So whenever we have the dark, now see there's no holes here. This does not make holes. And there are no holes on this side either. We turn the work, we follow the stitches on the needle. I'm going to trim those ends off because they keep showing in the work. Look at these cute little scissors. I bought those myself as a treat. There. Now those won't get in the way. So now we knit back. We're following the stitches on the needle. We know we're going to slip the white. We're working with the dark. So those stitches will be knit. And remember to leave space for the stitches, because if you pull it too tight, you'll end up with this part of your scarf will be very narrow and it won't look good. Turn the work. Now where are we? Let's see. This is, we've done row 1, and then we've done row 5. We've done row 9, so we're ready to do row 11. Can you see that? To find out where you are, I'm just looking at the dark. So I have 1, 2, 3 dark sections going across. 1, 2, 3. I'm ready to do light because the dark is on the needle here. The second stitch is dark, so I know the next one has to be light. So we're doing row 11. So we're going to knit the selvage stitch, the first selvage stitch. Then we're going to drop the green over the white, pick up the white. This is what ties them together at the edge. And we're going to knit 2 stitches because we're on row 11. Then we're going to slip 1, knit 1, slip 1, knit 1, slip 1, knit 2, and turn. And we follow the yarn back. We just knit the whites, slip the dark. Now this pattern could be worked in the opposite colors too. You could do light for the dark and dark for the light. It will look just as striking. Now we're back at this edge. We've already worked the green, so we bring it over the white. The white goes underneath. and we're going to be ready to do row 13. So we're doing every other stitch again. Whoops, I'm sorry. Wiped my nose and hit my camera. So we're going to knit this stitch, slip, knit, slip. I love mosaic stitch. I love it if you do the dark color in garter stitch and do the light color in stockinette stitch. It's kind of like chenille. The pearl bumps of the color stand up on the stockinette stitch fabric. It is just lovely. I'll show you a sample in just a minute. At the end, I'll show you a piece I'm knitting. It's a poncho. I may enter it in the fair this year, but I still have to, I've got all the mosaic knitting finished. I have to do the finishing. I have to put it together and knit a cowl for it. Okay, now we're back to this side. Turn our work. Now we're ready to do 15, which is a white row. Here's our white. Well, let's see what it's looking like on the back. This is where the two yarns are being intertwined along the back there. See that? And that's what keeps holes from forming between the outer selvage stitch and the inner selvage stitch. So we're on row 15. We're on 15. Let's see, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're on row 15. So we're going to knit our first selvage stitch in the black, and then we cross the black over the white, pick up the white, and on row 15 we have 2, 1, 1, 1, 2. So we're going to do that. I'm going to knit it through the second short row so we can do the short row together again, because I know that's confusing. And we have our selvage stitch left, so we turn before we get to it. And we're just going to follow our stitches back, slipping the yarn with the yarn in the front, slipping the stitch with the yarn in the front because we're on the wrong side. Okay, now we're ready for row 17. We've got our green here. We take it over the white, white under, green over. The white's just going down literally. And we're going to do 17. So we have 3 knits in a row. I gotta picked up the thread there. Split a stitch. 1, 2, 3. Then we have a slip, a knit. And now another thing in mosaic knitting, you will see more than one stitch slipped at a time, but usually not more than 2 or 3, because it really doesn't look good. This is it's really cute, isn't it? Okay, now we're going to work back. We're doing great. And I'm going to show you that cowl in just a second. I want to do the short row thingy one more time. Okay, we turn. We're doing row 19 now. We've got just 2 more rows to do. It'll go real quick. So remember, we do the selvage stitch first. Then drop the dark over the light, pick up the light, and we're going to knit 4, slip 1, knit 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, slip 1, knit 4, and then we're going to turn, leaving the selvage stitch there. And we're going to work these back, just following the needle, what's on the needle. Here's the slip stitch. Be sure to leave space for it. Now bring the yarn to the back, or to the wrong side. It's actually to the front. We're ready to do that last row right here, and we're going to do that little short row there, and we're going to do a short row here. So we already did one knit stitch with that selvage. We've already worked it. So we work the second selvage stitch, and we're going to work all the way over to here. The reason we don't do the short row right off is because if we do this, we're wrapping a white stitch and it will show. We don't want to wrap a white stitch. We want to wrap a green stitch because then it will be invisible. So we have to do it on the return row. So now, let's move this out of the way. We don't need that anymore, and I'm going to magnify this. We're going to do that short row. We knit 2, slip the next stitch point to point, bring the yarn forward, slip it back. Turn your work, knit back, turn, and we're going to knit all the way across to the other end. Okay, and I want to show you what these short rows look like on the front of the work. So you can see why you don't have to pick them up and conceal them, because they're literally invisible in garter stitch. And you can do this anytime you're working short rows in garter stitch. You do not have to pick up the wraps. We're going to wrap the stitch. We bring the stitch over, tip to tip, put it back, turn the work. Oops, get the yarn out of the way there. And work back. Now let's take a look at this, the right side. See our extra row here? This is the bottom row when we went over, and this is the extra, these 2 stitches. And here's the wrap right there. Can you see how it just blends in with the garter stitch? Over here, we worked over, we came back, here's the wrap. It just looks like a garter bump. Now if we look down the side here, here's the first one that we did. Right here. Again, it looks like a garter bump. Here's the one we did over here, right there. Now you can see how the fabric is even now. See how this is going straight across? Before it was going like this because we had the extra rows there, but really, once this is blocked and laid out, it's going to be very straight, flat. The edges look good. And where we connected the yarn here is inside just to the edge of the selvage stitches. Hold on, let me get that piece I want to show you. I'll just show you a small piece of it, but you can see how it looks, the three-dimensional effect. So the dark is worked in garter stitch and the light is worked in stockinette stitch. Isn't that beautiful? I love it. So I have a whole poncho. It's got a lot of different mosaic knitting designs on it. I did these, see the little pearl bump sticking up there? Okay, so thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you're enjoying knitting the scarf, and I'll see you back for the next video real soon. Happy knitting!